You have some countries that, with their more authoritarian, centralized power, they want to keep the whole control. But I think it's kind of historic legacy.
Welcome to this podcast created by the e-Estonia Briefing Center. In this series, we invite some of the most influential people in politics and business to discuss all angles of digitalization in Estonia and the world, from past learnings to current challenges and future plans. So take a seat, pour yourself a glass of your favorite drink, and enjoy the art of digitalization. Hello and welcome to another iteration of The Art of Digitalization. I'm your host, Florian Marcus, and today with us we have Tanel Sepp. He's the Ambassador at Large and Director General for the Cyber Diplomacy Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Estonia. I'm going to have to take a breath here. He has had several exciting career stations throughout his life, and today he will tell us all about them in just 30 minutes. So I'm very excited to have Tanel here with us today. Tanel, thank you so much for taking the time. How are you?
Hello. I'm quite good. Thank you.
Yes, we are recording this in late February, and the situation with Ukraine is still sort of in development. I'm guessing that makes you quite a busy person, which is why I'm very grateful that you did really take the time to talk to us.
I think any Estonian diplomat is very busy right now.
I think that's fair to say, yes. Perhaps to help the listeners understand your background a bit more, so that we can understand your insights better as well. So you've been a diplomat for the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You have done some work for the Ministry of Defense, and now you're in cyber diplomacy again for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Can you perhaps tell us what got you interested in this field in the first place, diplomacy in general, and then cyber in particular, and maybe also the most important steps of your career, and what the most important memories and learnings from those parts were? It's a lot of questions. I'm sorry.
It is, but let me start from the beginning then.
Yes,
I've been in the Foreign Service for 19 years. And so far, I would say I've had the luck and the chance really to serve in quite different places. And this is why I love my job. Usually diplomats, you are in your capital and then you go to some foreign posting. I just came back from Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
Not many Estonian diplomats have that chance because usually we don't have an embassy there. But before that, I've been to Washington, I've been to Kabul, I've been to Brussels and Luxembourg.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what really excites me. And if you ask me how I became a diplomat, then I don't have a good answer. At one point, when I was a school kid, I simply decided I will be a diplomat, and that was it.
And here you are.
Here I am. I mean, there's nobody in my family who has been doing a job that would be even close to diplomacy. Nothing.
Yeah.
Now, cyber, I'm of the belief that any Estonian diplomat needs to be at least partly digital diplomat or versed in some extent in cyber security matters. Because this is what we do here in Estonia.
It's e-Estonia after all, yeah.
E-nation, digital nation, e-residency cards that we issue at our embassies, you name it.
Mm.
When I was in DC, and I was there as a number 2 at the embassy, I understood that that cyber was something that opened doors for us.
Mm.
And I was there from 2012 until 15. So at first, it was really difficult. You were kind of scratching the door at some Congress hallway, you wanted to tell your story about the Estonian security situation and so forth, nobody was so much interested.
For what? Why should we listen? Yeah.
Exactly. Well, we're talking today about Ukraine, but then also 2014, Ukraine happened, Crimea. And then we had a kind of flooding of US senators and congressmen. We were even at one point starting to calculate which one of them has not been to Estonia.
Yeah.
So at that moment, of course, things changed a lot. But before that, cyber was definitely something that opened the doors. And by nature, I'm geek enough to be interested in these kind of things. And in my high school, I learned coding. So,
well, you are Estonian, so that makes sense.
It does. It does. I remember coding using these 5-inch floppies for coding, and then 3-inch floppies, and then when we got to 386s, that was something special, actually.
We may have to explain to some of the younger listeners what a floppy disk is, but
good luck with that.
You mentioned that cyber opened doors for Estonia. Why? Do you think it was just a topic that was in the ascendancy through situations such as in Ukraine, or did people find out about Estonia before because of the 2007 attacks? Where does this door opener aspect come from?
That was one of these topics that was quite sexy. Yes, 2007 attacks and this first nationwide attacks against Estonia. We saw cyber elements being used also in 2008 in Georgia. So things were moving at that time quite fast. The US was trying to also build up their own regulations. You had really this big tech coming in, so you had to find somehow how to live with that.
NATO CCD COE was created in the same breath as well. So
indeed.
Yeah, true. So from all of this, you are now an ambassador at large, which is an excellent title. What does an ambassador at large do?
Well, for me, sometimes I think it's just a fancy title that I can use abroad, and then
it looks good on a business card, I would imagine, if the Estonian government still makes paper business cards. But
yes, we do, we do. But it's kind of now a new format amongst quite many countries. You have this cyber diplomacy ambassadors, and it's always easier to interact with their interlocutors when you're on the same level.
Yes.
So within Estonia, I'm definitely not using that title.
No.
I am using that abroad, and I've been now on this position for almost 2 months.
And you're the second person to ever be in that position.
That is true.
So it's quite an exciting thing.
It is, but already now I've had several trips and several trips are forthcoming now. So, especially now with the Ukraine topic, everybody really wants to discuss and really see how we can go further from here.
So in a previous podcast, I talked to an Estonian Ukrainian advisor to the government and so on, and we discussed Estonia's efforts in the United Nations Security Council, where there was a focus on the attribution of cyber attacks and also the sort of contextualization within international law of what a cyber attack constitutes. I think it's fair to say that the efforts have not been complete, because you cannot complete these things in a month or two. That's not how it works, which is both good and bad in many ways. But how can the international community come to an agreement on building a legal framework on how to react to these things? Can we at all? And if so, what's missing to make this sort of work happen?
This is a tough question, and it
Well, we
kind
have
of
30 minutes.
it kind of goes to the core what my tasks are at the ministry. Let me say first that within the UN, the United Nations, we have managed to agree on certain principles. And one of the main ones is that that cyber should not be taken as something weird, abstract thing, that international law does apply also in cyberspace. Now, the question here is how do you interpret that? And here, different countries have slightly opposing views. From our point of view, we are looking at the situation where you have so-called Western countries or like-minded countries against Russia, China, countries that have tried to kind of build their own internet, tried to kind of restrict people's rights online and so forth. Today, if you look at the political situation, I would say that this division has gone even wider. And it's going to be more and more difficult to come to the same page. We are right now also in the middle of similar debates within the UN, and it's very, very difficult to agree on anything right now.
I can imagine, especially considering the current circumstances. Just for your information, my background is in political sciences, and one of the most widely discussed theories over the last few decades has always been democratic peace theory, and also this idea of economic interconnectedness, so that if two countries are democratic, if two countries are doing a lot of trade and so on, that the likelihood of war between them or conflict between them decreases, because they are by and large somewhat dependent on each other. And arguably, reactions like sanctions, they can punish, they can punish the other person for its behavior, or the other country. But it also sort of decouples the economies a bit. It sort of cuts some of the cords between those countries. Would you say that the decoupling of the internet, as it does happen in countries like Russia and Ukraine and China, that could fit into the same model, that the decoupling of the internet can create a larger base for future misunderstandings or conflict? Would that be fair to say?
You are referring to this so-called balkanization of internet, I guess.
One could call it that, yes.
Of course, if you look at, especially at China, and this so-called Great Chinese Firewall,
yes, yeah,
and what Russia has been trying to do, then there are certain trends. At the same time, economy and how economy functions has been changing so much since these kind of theories that you referred to were written. The tech giants that enjoy budgets larger than Estonia's national budget do set certain rules or certain behaviors, and the supply of chain, both in terms of services and in terms of production, that has become global. So there might be some countries that will try to cut themselves out of the whole global system, but I'm not sure they can do it to the end. They will still be dependent on and some of the products or the resources,
the infrastructure underlying,
they come from abroad.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you take the mineral resources that you need to produce your small microchips or any electronics, could come also from some other places.
Yeah, true. Ignoring what is hopefully a temporary situation in Ukraine, what are the big challenges that lie ahead for Estonia? What role do you play in addressing those challenges?
I think the biggest challenge is to do everything possible to kind of extend the same kind of thinking to a bigger number of countries. We have right now this division, as I said before, but there's also a huge number of countries that do not care about these questions or have not thought about any of these more ideological issues.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is how to bring them to our side. And what are the leverages for us to do so? Is it capacity building? Is it trying to find some funds for their own build-up of cybersecurity? Is it something else? That's a big question.
Yeah. I don't want to put any words in your mouth, so I will just put them in mine. The current state of the internet and how to govern everything surrounding it reminds me personally a bit of a Cold War mentality where you have two sort of ideologically loaded understandings, and then you've got quite a few countries actually on several continents that just are quote unquote non-aligned, or they are just not as attentive as they either should or even could be. Would that be fair to say, or is that just my understanding?
Yeah, that is quite accurate. What is important here for us is to really maintain the present intergovernance structure.
Yes,
which is so-called multi-stakeholder approach, where you have internet that is governed by so many different entities.
Mm-hmm.
You have players that are NGOs, you have the tech companies, then you have the national regulations, international views, and it has to stay like this.
Mm-hmm.
Where we see a certain problem, or I see a certain problem, is that you have some countries that, with their more authoritarian, centralized power, they want to keep the whole control. So they want a bit different system.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's kind of historic legacy. They're thinking they want to retain in this interstate architecture. But the reality is that our modern world doesn't work like this.
It's mostly out of their hands anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We do need to take into account all these different entities that are there.
Yeah. Talking perhaps just for a second about Ukraine. One more thing that struck me, and this is actually goes hand in hand with what we talked about before, with the current legal difference between physical attacks and cyber attacks. In the physical world, it's not clear cut, but it is at least possible to show de-escalation. So if you withdraw 100% of your troops from a border and you tone down the rhetoric, then you give very clear physical signals that you are interested in a diplomatic solution or that the crisis is over for you or whatever it is. This seems to be very difficult to show in the digital sphere. So when we talk about cyber attacks, cyber de-escalation afterwards seems to be a lot trickier. Is there anything that we can do to advance a common understanding on how to get away from the brink of a greater conflict, whether it's physical or digital?
Of course, I mean, you have your mobile phone in your hands. I have my notepad with paper. You see how much I write here. I have no idea what you have in your phone.
True.
And I don't know how hostile you will become with the questions on your phone. So how should I de-escalate that?
It's tricky, yeah.
It is tricky. And I don't have a jammer or anything else here so that you would not be able to use a phone.
True, yeah.
I can still use my paper with a jammer, but
yes.
that's another story. Look, I don't believe that major cyber incidents, cyber attacks, happen in isolation. Especially if we talk about this national security and state-sponsored cyber attacks. Mm-hmm. There's always some bigger plan behind that. So the question here is how then the states should act.
Mm-hmm.
And in these terms, I don't think it should be different than what we think in normal world.
Mm.
I'm not going to to some of these legal arguments here or legal terminology.
We wouldn't want to turn this into a legal podcast, so thank you very much. No.
But it is about the state behavior and what we should expect from a government to do. Let's say you have a DDoS attack from country B to country C. So country C should expect that country B would do something to stop the DDoS attack.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a normal thinking, I would say.
Yeah.
Now, if we talk about more complicated attacks or kind of phase before the attack, how do we know if country B that wants to attack country C isn't already in the systems of country C, and then doesn't want to use its exploits at one point? But then again, you have to look at the context. You have to understand what's the motivation there.
Reminds me of the discoveries last year in the United States, where it was, not for the first time discovered that there had been operators inside the system for quite some time, and the questions, of course, were whether they were intentionally trying to lay low, or what the ultimate purpose of these attacks was. To perhaps go back to a slightly lighter note, you mentioned at some point at the beginning that when you were a school kid, you just got this idea in your head at some point that why not become a diplomat? How easy is it these days, or how difficult is it these days, to work for the public sector in Estonia, and why should people do it? In many countries, I think the perception is that it's a very archaic, a very bureaucratic place, the public sector. But having worked for the public sector in Estonia myself, I can attest that the public sector in Estonia is arguably less bureaucratic than many startups in Germany. So perhaps you can shed some light on what people should do and why they should care about working for the public sector. What's the most fun part of your job?
For me as a diplomat, it is about experiencing so many different environments, countries. Whenever you go to a new country, it's that you learn so much about that country that you become so much more than a normal tourist. On so many occasions, I've been walking in Brussels or in Washington, and somebody asks me for directions to this and that place, and then I simply explain because I know.
Because you're at home there for the time being. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
And all these different places, you have to make these places your homes at that time. For a diplomat, you need this ability to adjust. Without that, no, you won't be able to become a diplomat, I would say.
What was your favorite stint as part of the your activities as a diplomat? So what country was the most impressive or memorable for you? And even though the selection is limited because Estonia does not have 190 embassies around the world, what would be maybe one embassy location where you could say, "Oh, this would tempt me back"?
It's not Kabul, Afghanistan. No.
That's very understandable.
And I've been enough in warm places that maybe next one I would prefer also a warmer place. But no, I mean, no, I'm not going to say any destination.
Okay, that's fair.
Because
it's very diplomatic of you.
No, it doesn't matter. Because at any place you do your job as well as you can. You really put a lot of effort to feel home at this place. Your friends are always happy to visit you in new places. So yeah, maybe there's more difficulties if you are further away in Australia or well, we don't have an embassy in New Zealand, but that's even further. That if your family needs you at home back in Estonia, then it could be a bit more difficult. But other than that, hopefully when situation with COVID gets better, then we'll have more possibilities also to travel. So,
is there? I should ask you two more things that are more on a personal user level rather than in your personal in your professional activities. Have you declared your taxes online yet, and in what context have you done it?
Of course, I have.
I think the declaration has been open for half a week now. I think so.
I did my taxes on Sunday. And usually it has taken me much less time. This time I wanted to check some of the transactions that I had made. So I had to log in also to my bank to check some of the numbers, and then I did my tax within still a couple of minutes.
So 4 rather than 2 minutes. That's a terrible experience for the average Estonian.
Something there, yeah.
And the last but not least question would be, do you have a favorite digital service that you like to use from the Estonian service portfolio? Whether it's the digital signature or voting or the tax declaration or anything else, anything that pops up into your mind immediately?
No.
All of them.
No, but there's one occasion that I tell my friends who live abroad, where I was quite amazed how things worked. I used to own a car, and somewhere in the parking lot at a shopping center, some other car had backed into my car, but not in a bad way. Only the license plate was dented. But I wanted to change it. And it was Good Friday, so public holiday in Estonia. And I logged into the road authority system. I ordered a new license plate. I explained, I paid my fee, and I took the normal service.
There is an accelerated version, and then there is the regular speed. Yes.
I took the regular one. And next week on Tuesday, I got an SMS that the new license plate was waiting in the post box.
Yeah.
So I was thinking,
how?
What will be the expedited version? Why would I even need that? So that's kind of my very good experience. But I would say that using all these different services has become so ordinary, and just part of our nature now.
It's quite remarkable that you say that. My wife is Estonian as well, and she told me that she has never voted on paper. She's 29, and so she has never had the opportunity to go vote on a paper ballot. Of course, she could if she wanted to, but why would you if you can do it from home? So yeah, things have been around for quite some time now. I-voting since 2005. To those that do not know this,
when I was in Afghanistan, I visited many times Estonian troops, and then there was also voting for our parliament.
Yeah.
And I decided that I'll give the opportunity also to our soldiers. So I had the ballot box, I had the ballots, and I was granted access to certain databases so that I would verify who's who. And with this, I went to Helmand province, and I had a tent and a small secluded room for voting, and for me that was a really symbolic thing to do, to give the opportunity to vote on ballot. Because actually in Kabul I might have wanted to use it myself also, but what really surprised me was that among half of these Estonian guys told me, well, I have my ID card.
Yeah.
No, I don't need you. But
thanks for coming. But
the other half still felt it quite exotic. To be in this Helmand desert, in this military camp, and then the
casting
vote.
your ballot. That's a very cool memory. Well, Tanel, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I'm sure that our listeners back at home, wherever they are on Spotify or Apple Podcasts right now, have enjoyed this conversation as well. Thank you so much for giving us insights into what you do, what Estonia does these days. I wish you all the best in what still is quite a new position, both in general in its existence and also for you. And I'm sure that Estonia will continue to open many, many doors with the topic of cyber and digital. Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
And that's the end of yet another thought-provoking conversation about the art of digitalization. In the meantime, make sure to stay connected with e-Estonia on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. You can also check out our website e-estonia.com to learn more about digitalization in this beautiful country and other upcoming events. For now, that is all from our side. Stay tuned for our next podcast episode, and have a great day. Thank you.